Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Good to have you back. Now we've been pretty quiet here on the channel, been busy doing all sorts of stuff, but I'm glad to find some time here and there to put stuff together. And I was working on a very big personal project that I thought, you know what, I might as well record it in bits and pieces and put it together for you, because who knows, maybe it'll help someone out. Thanks for watching anyway, we appreciate you. So right now you're looking at my new Unraid server, and well, new might be the wrong word. This is actually the original server from last year, resurrected though, on a new skeleton, if you will. We're going to talk about building a server in a large server chassis, and you know, the complications that came with that, and things that I stuffed up on that will hopefully help you out. This will include knowledge on, you know, the type of cabling that we had to use, you know, the restrictions on certain parts that you can use, or you know, just a journey along the way. There's a lot I had to learn on the fly that I basically never knew before, and I'm going to share that with you today. Alright guys, well thanks for jumping in. So here we are on the server Osiris, and you can see that there's quite a bit going on in terms of information. The first thing you'll notice is that we have our i9 processor down here. We've got our containers already running. We have our shares set up, and we have all of our disks showing up as well. We've also got our UPS plugged in at the moment. We've got 64 gig of RAM. We've got a dual NIC card, which is separate to the one on the motherboard, and that's an enterprise server network card, so that's why I use it. It's not 10 gig though, so it's a bit, you know, it's a bit older. That'll be an upgrade in the future though, but for now it's just a standard 1 gig card with dual NICs. We then also have our built-in GPU, of course, on the actual Intel chip. We don't have a dedicated GPU. If I just quickly jump into the main screen, you'll see all of our devices here. Here's our drives, here's our 2 cache pools that we have, and we have our USB that we're using for Unraid itself. And we've got a whole bunch of setup in Unraid that I'd like to share with you guys as well, because it's pretty helpful to know. And they're things that, you know, if you don't have to reset your system for a long time and then you decide you want to, you know, build a new one maybe, or you had to restart on your current server that's running Unraid, these are some pretty useful tips that might be helpful. Then we've got plugins. I'll go through, you know, a quick overview of those as well, some important ones that, you know, are pretty helpful. And then we have our containers. I'll show you an overview of our containers and what we're doing with them. So if I open these up at the moment, you'll see these are the full list of containers. Now you might be asking, where's the rest of them? Because you've watched previous videos, we usually have gone through, you know, heaps of different containers that we use. Well, I've taken a different approach with this server setup, which is also what I'm going to talk about. Previously, I had one server that was both a NAS and a server, working in one machine. Now, for the most part, that's fine. But in my scenario, I found, you know, I ran into issues where I did a lot of maintenance tasks, and that would take down the NAS server, it would impact other people, and I may be working on something completely separate. So I started eliminating that by creating separate containers for things. You know, like an LXC container runs just for a proxy. An LXC container runs just for AdBlock. So that way I could work on something like Sonar and Radar, but leave Plex up and running and not impact it. I love the case, by the way. The case is absolutely amazing. I just outgrew wanting to go into a case to change out hard drives and cabling and all that. I really wanted to go to a hot swap setup. You know, maybe not necessarily the technical definition of hot swap where I'm doing it while it's on, but the ability to just be able to slide drives in and out is huge for me personally. And obviously to want to expand in future, because I just kept finding I hit the capacity with whatever case I was in. So in this case, everything's set up. We've got all these containers running. I want to take you through the journey of the actual server to getting to this point, because what you're looking at here is the end result. So why don't we go back to the start, which was about 2 months ago. So 2 months ago, I'm searching the web and I'm looking for a server rack chassis. I looked far and wide, you know, up and down, inside out, you name it. And unfortunately here in Australia, we're not blessed with a lot of the options that a lot of other international customers have access to. I stumbled across this case, and again, like I said, not a lot of options here in Australia. We don't have a lot of super micro servers just you know, refurbished every day. I really struggled to find anything here in Australia. So I found this case come up and I thought, okay, that looks pretty interesting. Don't know much about Silverstone, would like to know more. So we support 20 drives. They're hot swap trays. They've got a small little, if you want to call it a bracket inside that will also hold a 2.5 drive, which is huge. You know, everything comes with it. It has this lovely little set of switches and USB ports here with some light indicators as well. It has a spot for 2 SSDs inside the chassis. Optionally, you have the DVD drive bay. Otherwise, if you're not going to be using that, you can just take that out and put another SSD if you want to as well. It fits in there as well. And it comes with sliding rails, you know, very sturdy looking thing. I thought, wow, this looks interesting. I'm gonna think on it for a while. That while didn't last long. I think about a week later, I decided to pick one up, and you know, I had to drive across the state to get it, but I ended up finding one and picking it up. I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't cheap. It was, you know, expensive, especially by our standards here, easily in the $1,000 range, Australian. And here's what the backplane looks like. Now, the backplane is probably one of the most important parts, right? All the drives that you see in the front over here, they're plugging into this backplane. So now we're looking at the back, and you can see that's the backplane there. The backplane has to connect to somewhere else. Now, as you guys saw in our series where we built a Proxmox server with TrueNAS and all that stuff, you know, we have a LSI RAID card, which is basically essential if you're going to be running this, unless your motherboard has enough ports, which I doubt in most cases. People don't have those kind of motherboards. You will need this card. Now, this card for me was about $70 at the time, Australian, and it sits inside here and it lets you plug SAS cables. Now, the problem is the card that I had, at least, did not have enough ports to support this many SAS cables. What you're looking at here is 5 cables. The card that I have only had 2. So I had to purchase something called a SAS expander. So I had to go do some research with that, and I'll show you that shortly. And the SAS expander then allows you to plug the expander into your LSI card. And then from the expander, you know, you've got heaps more ports. I think I've got 6 on mine. And that basically supported all of these, but then also supported a spare when I decide if I need it for whatever reason. SATA ports on my motherboard to use for other things, just like the SSDs that are on the front. It came with modular fans, which was really cool, and one of the best parts about it is that it supports full height equipment. The power supply was just a normal standard power supply that I picked up, and I'll show you that. Motherboard, standard ATX, you know, all the rest of it, just all came out of a PC case. So no special server hardware. I was able to build it as if it was a normal computer. But the best part is that you had so much room to work in that it was actually really fun to build inside of. And you know, this is a kind of chassis that you would not just be changing out in your next build. This is something that you invest in and you keep for a very, very long time. Most of the components are probably replaceable. The backplane I have a bit of reservations about. I mean, I'm not sure how hard that would be to replace. The company is very responsive with support and things like that, from what I've seen. So, you know, maybe it's not an issue, but I still have some reservations about that part. And the fact that it comes with sliding rails is just amazing, because the one thing that none of this information really hit me with, and this is probably my own fault, is just how big this bad boy is. Width is fine, very standard width for any server rack, but the depth is longer than what I have in my rack currently. So I had to make some small adjustments to make it work, and I'll talk about that as well. So anyway, that's the chassis, guys. It's a Silverstone chassis, SST RM43 320 RS. That's the model number for this chassis, and it's a 4U chassis with 20 drives inside of it. Now, by far, one of the most critical points of this build is this expander. I basically waited a very long time. This came from China. You know, the unit's in great condition off eBay, verified seller and all that. So very happy with my purchase, but it just took a while. Coming from China, I think it took about maybe 2 weeks. In today's day and age, I suppose that's not too bad, but nevertheless. Now, when I tried to look this chassis up and I tried to understand a lot of information about how to power up the backplane, I found very little information, and the information that was there was, you know, maybe not the most clearly explained, so you just kind of had to read between the lines. Long story short, the backplane has obviously 5 planes on it. Each plane has 2 4-pin Molex ports to allow you to power it up. And one row is supposed to be the redundant power. The other row, the other column I should say, is supposed to be the main power. So I had a lot of conflicting information. Did I need 10 ports for a 4-pin? If so, that's going to be pretty difficult to come by in a standard power supply that you see on the market. Or does it mean I can just power them with 1 per backplane? And anyway, long story short, to save you guys some time, you can use 1 per backplane. However, it's not recommended, obviously, because the whole point of having a redundant one is that if you lose one, your drives aren't just going to die and stop with the power off. It's going to allow it to switch to a redundant power supply. And here you go. This is the power supply I ended up finding, which gives me 6 SATA ports, peripheral and SATA, importantly as well. Being very careful that you got the right wording. In the power supply then came the next question: how many cables do they give you? Are they going to give me enough if I want to use 1 port per backplane, which is the recommended setup because of the power distribution. This one has 6, and it came with, I believe, 2 cables. So it came with 2, and that left me 4 ports. I had to order a few more cables off eBay, but I was very, very nervous about making sure that it was the exact same brand, or at least verify that works with this power supply, because I have had instances where I've fried my drives, and that's something no one should have to go through. So make sure whenever you're buying cables, they're definitely 150% verified for your power supply, exact model and everything. Otherwise, you risk damaging your devices using cables from other power supplies. Okay, so never do that. So that gave me enough ports, and eventually those cables arrived, and I could set 1 per backplane, and I felt pretty comfortable that that was going to be okay. Also, Corsair is known for their good quality builds, and this power supply is no exception. The thing is, when you want something with that many peripheral ports, it tends to go up in the wattage, and 1200 watt is a big boy power supply, so definitely going to get you through, a decent setup. Or if all 20 drives were to spin up, I know that this would be able to support that. And it's obviously good quality. Alright, so let's get to some building. Now what you're looking at here is a picture of the office. I didn't get a chance to show you guys up until now the picture of the office now that it's basically complete. You can see there's a lot of work done in here with the design. It's not a $1 million studio by any means, but it's something that really gives you a space to work in. You can see I haven't done the conduit for the Cat6 cabling up here yet, and I kick myself every day that I haven't done it yet, but I really need to get it done. What you're looking over here is my personal desk, and over here is my work desk. So I've got 2 different desks. They're sit-stand desks as well, and that has a second benefit, which I'll talk about shortly. Just another picture there. And here's the chassis opened up this bad boy, and you can just see right into it. As you can see, very decent quality. I started going through it and just trying to figure it out. Inside came with all the extras and cabling and caddies for your SSDs, all ready to go. So over here you can see 1 slot for the SSD and another slot here for an SSD, and then you have one that can fit here if you wanted to mount one here as well. Otherwise you put a drive, obviously a DVD drive here. These are the Molex connectors that I was talking about. So if you just come in here, you can see there's 2 on each backplane. This is 1 backplane. Then there's 2 underneath that on that backplane, and so on and so forth. Under here, there's a cutout, an oval cutout underneath this fan, and another one underneath this fan. You can just see it a little bit. You'll probably find it in another photo as we go along. And that's where the cables are coming through. So they are the parts that give you somewhere to run cables from. And sorry, there's another one here as well in the middle. And that's how you're able to wire stuff underneath these fans, so that you can still take the fan in and out and it doesn't affect any of the cabling. Again, just usual server stuff you'll see. I'm sure it's nothing new. Then you have all these PWM headers for your fans. If you had additional fans you wanted to put in the case, you could run them off either the backplane or your motherboard, depending on what you prefer. And this space here is absolutely huge. Now, when I first saw this, I thought, okay, great. You know, my motherboard will definitely fit in that. But not only does it fit, it takes half this space. So my motherboard fits into these DAB slots. So one here, to here, to here, to here. Okay, so this whole section is extra space, just empty at the moment. Here's that power supply that I was talking about. It's 80 plus platinum. You know, again, just trying to be more efficient as well. If we have to spend money on a power supply like this, we want to make sure it's doing its job efficiently. Here's my first Samsung drive that I've mounted. So this is a Samsung 1TB SSD. I believe it's an Evo 980, something like that. And this is the first SSD that I mounted in the front of the chassis here. This is the front of the case, just a bit of a close-up for you. So you can see you just push down on that red button and the lever will fling open and allow you to pull the drive caddy out and replace those drives as you see fit. The other part here that I really like is this part. If you just push down on this, that releases like a locking mechanism when it's in the rack, allowing you to slide it out. Just an added little, just feels nice. You know, when you're grabbing these metal handles here and you just push down on that thing, it feels really cool. Feels like you're almost pushing like an ejector seat. Now, this is the other server that I was talking about. I said, you know, I'm running two servers. This is a DELL R710, and this guy is basically, if you want to call him brains of the operation, he's doing all the really high intensive processor stuff, or, you know, I want to keep basically the Unraid server as a NAS. I want that to be its primary server capability, and I want it to do, you know, media automation, all that, all in the one machine, obviously for the storage as well. That's what it does. Anything else, I run off this. Virtual machines, blah, 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 you name it. There's an ESXi host running on that, and it's got virtual machines, containers, you know, Docker, LXC, you name it. It's all running on there. Now, you guys saw what the office looked like clean. This is what it looks like a week in. This is outside, so it gets a bit dirty, and as you can see, I haven't vacuumed it for a while, and you can see just how much of a mess all this stuff is generating. There's the R710 just down here. There is a toolkit. There's a plastic bottle of nearly empty Coke with ciggy butts in there. Then we have the new chassis just up here, and this is the benefit I was going to talk about with a sit-stand desk. Something that I didn't think about actually when I was buying it. But the beauty of having something like a table that can go up and down is that it's really easy on your back. You can do things a lot safer and more enjoyable. So this server chassis, all my building, I could do sitting down, standing up, leaning over, and I can get this really heavy chassis, keep it low when it's being pulled out of the rack, you know, and put it on the table while the table's low, and then lift it up to me. Let the table lift it up to me. And that was really, really cool. So that's actually something that I didn't think about, having a sit-stand desk, but very useful. Just a little night shot for you of our rack that it lives in. So this is where you can see the old server case sitting right here, the Fractal. Here's the DELL server living here, and the new server is meant to go just underneath. Our terminal screen getting everything set up. And here we go, our first sign of life. We have our hardware moved over from the old system to the new one. Now, what you can see is a Cooler Master radiator. Now, this thing was interesting because it just fit. I was very, very cautious whether this was going to fit. I realized later on, after I already had everything ready, that the website that I showed you, where it's talking about the actual case, it tells you the maximum height that will fit. And that's something I didn't check. So just something is worth checking when you're going to do this, that your radiator is going to fit. So mine just fit. It literally touches the top of these pins when I close the lid, but nothing that really worries me, so I don't care. Here you can see the SATA ports on my motherboard, some more here, and I've taken all the chips out, obviously, while I was moving the hardware over, and our power supply all wired up. What you're looking at here is our two SSDs. I've got one just over here. This is an older one, so it's kind of like an extra, really. This one's the main SSD, wired up through there. You see I've just got all these SAS cables hanging over the edge while I'm working, just to keep it out of my way. And here's a top-down picture, probably actually one of the best pictures. So what you're looking at here is the back planes just there, the fans, and you can get a good idea of how the cabling runs underneath here through these channels and out around here. And one thing worth noting is just how much space we have. Look at the huge amount of space you've got just here to, get those SATA cables in, move stuff around, do a bit of cable tidying. And I'm going to tell you guys, I hate cable tying stuff. I am not a tidy person inside of most computers. This is no exception. I do make it a little bit better by the end. I try to clean it up a little bit once it's all in there. But unfortunately, I got these cables a little too long, these SAS cables. So they're very hard to move around once they're all in this braided sheath here. So something to keep in mind, maybe measure the distance if you can, and try and get ones that fit a little bit better. Over here, you'll see the LSI RAID card. So that's the one I was talking about with the 2 ports on it. And it has a short cable that I purchased to fit with a different end on the expander when it arrives. It hadn't arrived at this point. Just another shot. This is the SAS expander card by Adaptec, okay, which comes under like the Lenovo brand. There's our ports. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you've got 2 to go external. Now, what a lot of people do is, and you may be doing this yourself, is have a server chassis like the one we've bought, but has nothing in it except for the drives, right? And inside, they connect a cable from those backplanes up to another computer that might have this chip in it. So I could basically have, more storage attached to this chassis by plugging into those. So very, very useful for that as well. And just another shot there with the cabling in. You can see now I've got the RAID card here. The RAID card comes around and hooks up into the expander. And then from the expander, I've got all these SAS cables going in underneath, and they go to the backplanes plugs. Now, what you're also looking at is an NVMe over here, 250 gig. And then there's another NVMe just under here, which is a terabyte. Something to keep in mind is when you're using your NVMe's on your motherboards, depending, every motherboard's different. But in my case, by having an NVMe in this slot and one in this slot, SATA ports, I believe 2 and 4 or something like that, would be disabled, okay, which was somewhere over here on these ones. That didn't matter. I had plenty of ports that I could use instead to run for my SSDs, which you can see here, so that wasn't a worry, but just something to keep in mind. So we have 2 NVMe's in here, which is fantastic. I wasn't even using that port in my last build. There's our network card that you're looking at over here as well. And that's just got our 2 NICs in there to allow us to hook up to a network. So the moment of truth came where I had to put all my drives in, start it up and make sure that everything worked. Now what I did just as an extra precaution was take one drive, and it was my, least useful drive. It was just a random desktop drive that I found laying around. And I put that into the machine, started it up, and tested each backplane by putting it in, starting it up, checking that I see activity, that the BIOS picked it up fine, shut down, put it in a different backplane in a different column, and do that over and over, and test it about 5 times in random spots. That just told me that drives are being picked up okay, that the drive continuously is being picked up in different ports, it's not being fried, the power looks okay, everything's fine. And most importantly is testing that the Adaptec expander card is picking up the drives as well. Very, very important, otherwise it was all a waste. Sure enough, that all came back fine, so the next thing to do was get Unraid up and running. Now, if you've seen me use this server before, it's been around for a while. I've basically just refreshed it and started again to have all the things I need going. Now, if you're starting up, here's the best thing I would suggest you do for the first time. This is not talking about your very first install, because in that case, nothing will be set up. But if you had to reset, go here. It'll tell you whether you're missing disks or something doesn't look right with your array. If you know everything's gone and you don't care about your data, like if you're going to be resetting really hard, that's all good. Go to Tools and click on New Config. Now, read this, make sure you understand what's happening here. Whether you want to keep assignments for disks or anything like that, hit it and go. Keep in mind the array must be stopped for that to happen. Now this is going to be cool. That's going to allow you to just start nice and fresh. You come back here and you pick where you want stuff to live. Now I've got 2 cache pools here, as you can see. I don't really need this second cache pool. I just thought, well, these 2 disks are kind of sitting there. They're very small. They might as well just be in a pool doing something. But I don't have other reason to use it. If I did, maybe I would have kept it. This is the main pool, as you can see, 2 terabytes. It's absolutely massive and on decent SSD and an NVMe. So I have 2 different types there just to, I guess, load balance, if you will. In terms of Docker, getting everything set up, here's what my layout looks like. I'll quickly explain what's going on. First and foremost, you don't need NPM, you don't need Tailscale, and you don't need Cloudflare. If you don't plan to reverse proxy anything, you don't need these things. If you are, make sure you follow our videos on that. There is ones on Cloudflare and Nginx Proxy Manager and on Tailscale. Tailscale is going to be useful regardless if you want to reverse proxy, because it'll allow you to tap into your network through a VPN, aka Tailscale, and be able to get to everything as if you were at home or wherever your server's living. It's a very, very cool tool. Again, we've covered a video on that ages ago, but it's still a great product, and I really recommend it. I've never had an issue with it, never had to pay for it, anything like that. It's gained my confidence for sure. Then we have Plex. Obviously, one of the main reasons we're even setting this up. So we've got Plex running there on host, and we have some very important things that are always good to know. Our transcode directory goes to our RAM. That allows us to use RAM for transcoding, all right, which is absolutely huge. We also have our hard links / atomic moves paths configured for all of our media systems here. And by that, I mean we follow the Trash guide. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go check Trash's website out. Type in Trash guide, Plex in Google, Radar Sonar, it'll pop up and you'll find it. Very good resource of information. You can see how everything points eventually to that same spot. Anything that's related to our media points in that same spot, okay? So make sure you check that out, it's really important. Then we have all of our automation apps, and they all have very useful things about them. Now, I took backups of all these before I wiped my old server, which is pretty handy if you don't want to have to reset these up, which can take quite some time. Prowler provides all the indexes and whatnot to our other automation apps, Bazaar for the subtitles, Notifier to sync our Trash guides. Check that video out, it'll explain that for you, where you can just have Trash guides actually synced for you all the time. Overseer, Tortuli for our stats, and PMM for our Plex metadata. We then have our downloaders over here, which allow us to, well, the rest. So there's our Docker containers. In terms of plugins, here's our plugins that we're using. So we're using Turbo Write Mode, the Auto Update applications, CA Backup and Restore, CA Cleanup App Data, CA Mover Tuning, very important one there, Mover Tuning. Community apps, of course, Docker folder, and that's what allows us to have this icon here and have everything underneath it. If you like that, check that out. We have a video on that as well. And then a whole bunch of other things just to give us some information. Fix common problems is really useful. Highly suggest that one. GUI links is useful. Gives you stuff like this down the bottom. Intel GPU top, very important if you're running an Intel CPU with the iGPU built into it. And tips and tweaks is useful as well. Unassigned devices, definitely. Unraid Connect is your choice if that's something you'd like to do. I've got it on and I don't mind it. I think their new UI is actually quite intuitive and I do like that, but your mileage may vary. So just look into it and make your own mind up on that. And that's pretty much it. We go to our shares. We don't have really much in here. We've got an app data, which is standard. Backups, where I'm letting backups be stored. And then I'm going to set up in the future something like duplicacy or duplicati, whatever it is that we covered, to sync it somewhere else so that it's off our server. Okay, backup's no good if it's on the server that's dying. ISOs, media, and system. Pretty simple, guys. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. And what you're looking at here, you might be thinking, mine doesn't look anything like this. That's fine. Go through our videos, see what you can pick up out of them. It'll give you a lot of this stuff we've done here, like, the color theme. That's all something you can do yourself inside of Unraid. It provides you those options and lets you customize it any way you like. You've got display settings here, If you want this coming up, you know, you'll find all that stuff here in the display settings. Very, very handy. Go through the plugins that you install. Don't just install them, but actually go through them and understand what they're doing and how you can configure them for you to work better. You've got your disk settings. You know, if you're first starting off, keep in mind what kind of default file system you want to use. We use XFS, but look into what that means. It's a lot to explain in one video that's already very long here. Set up another user if you want to be able to get to your shares through SMB, which you can change, of course. And I actually need to change a couple of these back to private. And check out your array. Make sure everything is working. You know, test the mover. Very important you test the mover at some point, just to make sure things look like they're working as they should. They're going to the array the way you want them to. And there you go. So guys, that's moving into our Unraid server. It's a beautiful looking server. I actually love it. I think it's really, really cool. It's sitting there in the rack and it just looks great. I'm just looking at it right now as we speak. I hope you guys enjoyed that. It was a little bit of a journey, but you know what? I just thought I'd share it with you. Maybe some of you might have learned something out of it. Let us know what you thought. Chuck in a comment down below. Maybe you've had a build similar to this and you want to share your knowledge and wisdom for all those banging their heads against the drum. Let us know in the comments and we'd love to read them. Thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next IBRACORP video.